Title: He called for help. They treated him like a threat. Part 1. The Call for Help. Jamal Carter had always believed in the goodness of people. As a dedicated middle school teacher in Atlanta, he spent his days inspiring young minds, emphasizing the importance of integrity, empathy, and community. His modest home, nestled in a quiet neighborhood, was a testament to years of hard work and commitment to his students and family. One humid summer evening, as the cicadas hummed their nightly tune, Jamal prepared for bed. The distant wail of sirens was not uncommon in the city, but tonight a different sound caught his attention, a rustling near his backyard. Peering through the window, he noticed a shadowy figure lurking near his shed. Concerned for his safety and that of his neighbors, Jamal reached for his phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher assured him that officers would be dispatched promptly. Relieved, Jamal remained inside, watching from his window as 2 patrol cars arrived minutes later. Stepping onto his porch with caution, Jamal raised his hands slightly to appear non-threatening. "Officers, I'm the one who called," he began, his voice steady but respectful. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. "Sir, step down from the porch," one commanded, hand resting on his holstered weapon. Confused, Jamal complied. "I saw someone near my shed. I thought it best to call for assistance." "Identification?" the other officer demanded. Jamal gestured toward the house. "It's inside. I can go get it if you'd like." Part 2. When Help Hurts. The officer's voice turned sharp. "Don't move!" Jamal froze on the front lawn, barefoot, hands still raised. "I said I can go inside and get my ID." The older officer stepped forward, hands still on his holster. "That won't be necessary. Turn around and place your hands on your head." "What?" Jamal asked, stunned. "I called you." But his words were useless now. The officers weren't hearing him anymore. They were seeing someone else, not a homeowner, not a teacher, not a veteran's son. They were seeing a threat. Before Jamal could say another word, one of the officers grabbed his arm. "You're resisting?" "I'm not." His body hit the ground hard, knees slamming against the concrete walkway. One officer pressed a knee into his back, while the other yanked his arms behind him. His chest was crushed into the ground, face turned to the side, staring into the grass. "Please," Jamal groaned. "I can't breathe." "Stop squirming," the officer barked. "Stop resisting arrest." A porch light flicked on next door, then another, and then a voice. "Hey, what are you doing?" It was Layla Reynolds, a neighbor across the street, a nurse, early 30s, who'd always waved at Jamal on her morning jogs. She stood barefoot on her porch, robe wrapped tightly around her. "That's Jamal. He's the one who called." The officers didn't respond. Layla, heart pounding, pulled out her phone and started recording. "Get off of him," she yelled. But the officers continued. Jamal's face was twisted in pain. Blood leaked from his mouth. His lip had split open on the sidewalk. He wasn't resisting. He was surviving. Paramedics were called, not by the officers, but by Layla. Jamal was loaded into the back of an ambulance with a mild concussion, bruised ribs, a gash on his lip, and a fractured wrist. He didn't speak the entire ride. The EMT tried to ask questions, but Jamal just stared at the ceiling of the ambulance, eyes glassy. The betrayal had left him hollow. He had called for help, and the people meant to protect him had nearly crushed him. Layla uploaded the video online that same night with the caption, "This man called the police for help. They brutalized him on his own lawn. His name is Jamal Carter. We will not be silent." Within hours, it had over 600,000 views. By sunrise, it was trending nationally. Jabashurdi, justice for Jamal. Ishcharni ha called for help. A Protect Black Lives journalist began calling Layla. National networks reached out. Civil rights organizations began circling. And at the center of the storm, Jamal, bruised, broken, and silent in a hospital bed. The Oakdale Police Department released a brief statement by noon. "Last night, our officers responded to a suspicious activity call. During the encounter, an individual failed to comply with verbal commands and was restrained for officer safety. We are reviewing Bodycam footage and taking the matter seriously." They didn't say his name. They didn't say he was the caller, and they didn't apologize. But the video said it all. Protesters began gathering outside the Oakdale police station by sundown. Signs, chants, megaphones. "Say his name, Jamal Carter." Who do you call when the police are the threat? National leaders spoke out. Veterans groups released a statement condemning the use of force. Teachers across Georgia staged a walkout, many wearing shirts that said, "My colleague, my neighbor, my fear." Jamal's mother sat at his bedside holding his hand. She had driven 4 hours from Macon the moment she saw the video. "I saw it, baby," she whispered. "I saw what they did." Jamal turned his head, tears slipping from the corner of his eyes. "I thought I was going to die, Mama." She held him tighter. "You didn't, and now you live, and they're going to see what they did. You hear me?" The next day, a young black officer came to Jamal's hospital room. His name was Officer Deshaun Ellis. "I'm not here on duty," he said softly. "I'm here because that could have been me." He paused. "Because I wear the uniform, and I'm still afraid to walk my dog in the wrong neighborhood at night." He reached into his pocket and handed Jamal a card. "If you need anything, I mean it." Then he left. On day 4, Jamal gave a statement to the media, not in a press room, but sitting up in his hospital bed, eyes heavy, voice steady. "I didn't want this. I didn't want to be a headline. I just wanted help. I wanted the people I pay taxes for to protect me. Instead, they hurt me. I'm not here to destroy anything, but I will not be quiet. If I have to stand here, bruised, broken, and grieving, to make someone else safer, then so be it. But don't tell me to be calm. Tell them to do better." Part 3. A voice too loud to ignore. 3 days after his press statement from the hospital, Jamal Carter's story had reached every major news outlet in America. Cable news, national radio, podcasts, Twitter spaces, even late-night talk shows were talking about the man who called for help and got hurt instead. But Jamal didn't care about the cameras. What he cared about was being believed. Oakdale Mayor Christine Harper, a moderate Democrat known more for ribbon cuttings than justice reform, was forced to speak at a press conference. Surrounded by local officials, she read from a prepared statement. "The video of Mr. Carter's detainment is deeply troubling. I have called for an independent investigation and fully support transparency and accountability." It was a carefully worded performance, but it wasn't enough. Reporters shouted questions as she walked away. Was this racial profiling? Will the officers be fired? What will you do if the DA refuses to press charges? She said nothing, and the people noticed. Journalists and online sleuths identified the 2 officers from the video as Officer Brian Westfield, 42, with 16 years on the force. Officer Kyle Riggins, 29, 3 years on the force, 2 misconduct complaints previously filed. Once their names were known, the backlash exploded. Protesters surrounded the Oakdale PD headquarters. Their chants were simple: fire them now. Accountability or resign. The police department tried to hold its ground, issuing a vague update. The officers have been placed on paid administrative leave during the investigation. Paid leave. While Jamal lay in a hospital bed, the men who did this to him were still collecting checks. Celebrities joined the movement. NBA players wore Justice for Jamal warm-up shirts. Teachers across the country created lesson plans about racial bias in emergency response. Even military veterans posted videos in solidarity saying, "We didn't fight overseas for this to happen on our streets." The Oakdale City Council scheduled an emergency hearing. And more importantly, the state attorney general opened a civil rights investigation. While the world argued about him, Jamal tried to be still. He spent time with his mother, walking slowly through the garden behind her house in Macon. The bruises faded, but the soreness lingered. He had trouble sleeping. The sound of sirens made his chest tighten. Even a knock on the door sent a jolt through him. PTSD wasn't new to Jamal. He had read about it, taught kids who lived with it, even studied its effects in graduate school. But he had never felt it crawl under his own skin. On day 10, 2 civil rights attorneys from Atlanta came to see Jamal in person. One was Malik Rhodes, a former federal prosecutor with a calm voice and piercing eyes. The other, Amira Holmes, was young, brilliant, and fearless in court. "We're offering to represent you pro bono," Amira said. "You deserve justice, not just in headlines, but in a courtroom." Jamal hesitated. "I don't want this to become a circus." Rhodes leaned in. "Then let us make it a reckoning." That night, they filed a federal civil suit against the Oakdale Police Department. Officers Westfield and Riggins, and the city of Oakdale for failure to train and supervise. The suit detailed physical injury, emotional trauma, constitutional violations, and racially motivated excessive force. The filing itself was 32 pages long, but the first line said everything. This is a story about a man who asked for help and was hurt instead. Jamal received a text from Layla Reynolds, the woman who had filmed the video. "I'm with you if you ever want to speak. You're not alone. I see you." He wrote back, "Thank you. You helped to save my life." They agreed to meet. When they did, Jamal brought flowers. "I know this has affected you too," he said. "People forget that bystanders carry trauma too." Layla smiled. "It's been a lot, but I'd do it again." They hugged. Strangers no longer, just two people who refused to look away. That week, the city council passed a vote of no confidence in the police chief. He resigned the next day. Internal Affairs opened an official inquiry into all officers with more than 2 use-of-force complaints. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. And Jamal? He stood before the council using a cane to balance. "This isn't just about me. It's about the next call, the next porch, the next person who needs help and doesn't look safe enough to receive it. We don't want revenge. We want to trust again." Back in his classroom, weeks later, Jamal visited the school he'd taught at for years. His students stood when he entered. Many were crying. Some were drawing pictures of him as a superhero. One little boy asked, "Are you okay, Mr. Carter?" Jamal knelt, smiling gently. "I'm healing." Another girl raised her hand. "Why did they hurt you if you didn't do anything?" Jamal paused. "Sometimes people let fear make their decisions for them." Then he looked around the room. "But that's why we're going to teach the world something better." Part 4, When Justice is Personal. The news cycle may have quieted, but the movement Jamal inspired, it was only getting louder. Jamal returned home to Oakdale weeks after his hospital release. A different man, slower in his step but sharper in his focus. He had become more than a victim. He was now a voice, whether he liked it or not. Local groups began reaching out. Civil rights organizations, youth coalitions, even churches, asking him to speak, to advise, to help lead. He didn't consider himself an activist. "I'm a teacher," he told them. "That's all I've ever been." "Well," but they replied, "then teach us how to fight the right way." At the first Oakdale Community Forum on Policing and Race, Jamal sat beside a city councilwoman, a public defender, an activist, and a black police officer from the very department that once cuffed him. The auditorium was packed. One man shouted from the crowd, "What's the point? Nothing ever changes." Jamal took the mic. "Change isn't lightning, it's erosion. Slow, steady, but powerful. And sometimes it needs a spark. Maybe what happened to me was that spark. But the flame? That's up to all of us." Applause broke out, but not everyone clapped. News of Jamal's composure and leadership began to spread beyond Oakdale. State representatives reached out. Cable pundits argued over him. One side called him a voice of hope. The other called him a racial grievance opportunist. He tried to ignore them all. But when a local political group asked if he'd run for office, Jamal paused. "I'm not a politician," he said. "But you are what people wish politicians were," they replied. Meanwhile, pressure mounted on the Oakdale Police Department. The Internal Affairs report was completed, and it was damning. Findings: Officer Riggins had used excessive force on 5 separate occasions, all involving men of color. Officer Westfield had failed to de-escalate incidents and falsified parts of at least 2 previous reports. Neither followed correct protocol during Jamal's detainment. The report leaked. Public outcry surged again. Within days, both officers were fired, and for once, without pay. The district attorney, long criticized for avoiding police prosecution, could no longer stay silent. On a Friday morning press conference, she stood at the podium. "We are filing charges against Brian Westfield and Kyle Riggins for assault, false imprisonment, and violation of civil rights under color of law." Reporters erupted. Jamal watched from home, fists clenched, jaw tight. It wasn't celebration, it was relief. That night, Jamal sat with a national news anchor for a one-on-one interview. She asked him, "Do you feel vindicated?" Jamal shook his head. "No, this was never about feeling. It was about facing the truth. And now that we've done that, the question is, what do we build on top of it? In the weeks that followed, 4 nearby towns launched independent audits of their police departments. Oakdale approved a new Community Safety and Wellness Council to advise on policing. Over 200 people signed up to join Jamal's community forums, now held weekly. One night, a woman stood up at the end of the forum. She was white, mid-50s, nervous. "My son is a police officer," she said, "and I feared what you'd think of him. But after watching you, I told him to listen better, because you gave people like me a reason to listen too." Jamal smiled. That's how we start. But not everyone was inspired. A far-right protest erupted outside a city meeting, calling Jamal a fraud, race hustler, and anti-police agitator. They held signs that read, "Justice, not vengeance." Pre-were, "Blue Lives Matter too." Jamal measured publicity stunt. Jamal didn't show up. He didn't need to. The community did. Locals formed a human wall around the meeting hall, linking arms, standing in silence. No yelling, no violence, just presence, just power. Late one night, Jamal got a message from Derek Simmons, a former high school classmate turned police officer who'd left the force years earlier. "Been watching you, man. You're doing something rare. You're standing in the fire and not burning. If you ever want to do something bigger, I'm in." Jamal stood in front of a group of college students weeks later, guest lecturing at a criminal justice class. One student asked, "Do you think this will ever stop happening?" He didn't rush to answer. Then he said, "I don't know, but I know we'll keep filming, we'll keep speaking, and more importantly, we'll keep surviving. Until one day calling for help doesn't come with fear." Part 5. The Fork in the Road. The night before the first hearing against officers Westfield and Riggins, Jamal stood on the edge of his front porch, watching the streetlight flicker. He hadn't returned to his classroom yet. Not because he couldn't, the school had kept his position open, but because he knew he wasn't the same man who once taught 8th grade literature. He had seen too much, felt too much, became too much. The courtroom was packed. Media crews, local officials, concerned citizens. On one side sat the two officers, now in suits instead of uniforms, but just as unreadable. On the other, Jamal, flanked by his attorneys, mother, and a small army of supporters, including Layla and Officer Deshaun Ellis. When Jamal took the stand, the room held its breath. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," he said calmly. "I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't a threat. I was a man who called for help. I remember my face being pushed into the sidewalk. I remember bleeding. I remember thinking, this is how I die for calling 911. And I remember hearing a woman's voice, Layla, begging them to stop. That voice saved my life, but it shouldn't have had to." The officers' lawyers painted a different picture. Split-second decisions. Uncertainty. Neighborhood safety. They blamed the system, the training, even Jamal's tone of voice. But the jury wasn't moved, especially after bodycam footage revealed the officers had never even confirmed Jamal's identity before taking him down. As the jury deliberated, Oakdale held its breath. Protests remained peaceful. Stores posted signs of support. "We believe Jamal. Justice is local. Dignity over fear." Children chalked messages outside the courthouse. Old veterans wore pins with Jamal's name. On the third day, the jury returned. Guilty. Officer Westfield. Guilty of assault under color of law. Officer Riggins. Guilty of excessive force and falsifying a police report. Sentencing would come later. But for now, the courtroom erupted. Not in celebration, but in release. Tears, hugs, silence. Jamal simply closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." The very next week, Jamal received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Carter, this is Governor Linwood's office. The governor would like to speak with you personally." Jamal hesitated. "About what?" "He wants to hear your ideas about state-level police reform." Their team. They met in a quiet chamber of the state capitol. No cameras, no podium. Governor Linwood was an older white man, a centrist who had stayed neutral during the trial. Now he extended his hand. "You've changed the conversation, Mr. Carter. Whether I agree with everything or not, I respect that." Jamal nodded. "I don't want to burn the system down. I want it to see itself." They talked for an hour. Jamal outlined ideas: mandatory bias training, civilian oversight boards, transparency and officer discipline. The governor listened, took notes, then said, "You ever think about running for office?" Jamal blinked. "I'm not that kind of guy." "Maybe you are now." That night, Jamal sat with Vega, his old friend and now advisor. "Do you think I'd lose myself?" he asked. "Only if you stop being a teacher," she said. "Even in politics?" "Especially in politics." He smiled. "That's a good answer." Before making any decisions, Jamal did one thing. He returned to his classroom. The kids screamed when he walked in. Some clapped. Some just ran up and hugged him. He walked to the board and wrote, "What does justice look like to you?" Dozens of hands shot up. A girl in the back said, "It looks like you, Mr. Carter." He paused. And in that moment, surrounded by students who saw him not as a victim, but a mirror of possibility, he knew what he had to do. At a small press conference held in the Oakdale Community Center, Jamal stood behind a modest podium. No campaign banners, no slogan, just a simple truth. "I never planned on running for office, but I know what it's like to be unheard. I know what it's like to be invisible, even while you're bleeding. So I'm running, not to be a politician, but to be a protector, a listener, a builder of bridges this country desperately needs." A reporter asked, "What will you say to voters who claim you're only doing this because of what happened to you?" Jamal nodded thoughtfully. "They're right. I am doing this because of what happened to me. Because what happened to me should never happen to anyone else again." Part 6. The campaign begins. Running for office wasn't something Jamal Carter had ever imagined. He wasn't a speechmaker. He wasn't a strategist. He was a teacher, a neighbor, and a survivor. But now people looked at him and saw something else: a leader. Jamal sat in a small rented storefront with Vega Layla, Marcus, one of his former students, and two community organizers. They had no budget, no campaign manager, no website, but they had purpose. "I'm not running on charisma," Jamal said. "I'm running on clarity." "Then let's make that your superpower," Vega said. Jamal's campaign platform focused on police accountability reform, mental health crisis response units, restorative justice programs for youth, funding for education and trauma services in underserved neighborhoods. He didn't speak in slogans. He spoke in stories. And the people listened. Not everyone supported him. Some locals called him divisive. Some former colleagues distanced themselves. Yard signs were stolen. An online smear campaign tried to paint him as anti-law enforcement. But none of that surprised Jamal. He once told his students, "If you speak truth in a broken room, expect the floor to shake." Now the room was shaking, and he was still standing. Jamal's opponent was Councilman Ron Huxley, a polished, seasoned politician with deep pockets and plenty of allies. His ads painted Jamal as inexperienced and emotionally reactive. Jamal didn't retaliate. Instead, he posted a quiet video. "I'm not running against a man. I'm running against fear, against silence, against the belief that people like me aren't supposed to be in rooms like this." The video went viral. Jamal visited every corner of his district, from church basements to school cafeterias. He didn't promise miracles. He promised presence. In one meeting, an elderly woman asked, "How do we know you won't forget us once you win?" He took her hand gently. "Ma'am, I remember what it's like to be on the sidewalk, praying someone would care. I won't forget, because I can't." The televised debate was tense. Councilman Huxley leaned on policy lingo and polished rhetoric. Jamal spoke from the heart. When asked about police relations, Huxley said, "We support our officers, period. Let's not vilify those who keep us safe." Jamal responded, "I respect the badge, but respect without accountability is just silence in uniform. We don't want less safety. We want equal safety." The moderator paused, then said, "Mr. Carter, that's the quote of the night." As Election Day neared, the same streets where Jamal was once pinned to the ground were now lined with signs. "Carter for Council." Even the corner where he was attacked had new chalk art from local kids. "Hope lives here." The polls opened on a crisp November morning. People showed up in record numbers. Lines wrapped around schools and libraries. In neighborhoods that hadn't seen high turnout in years, Jamal's story had lit a spark. That night, the results came in. Jamal Carter, 53.7%, Ron Huxley, 46.3%. The crowd at Campaign HQ erupted. Tears, hugs, laughter. Jamal stood at the mic, quiet for a moment, then said, "You didn't elect a politician. You elected a neighbor, a witness, a man who refused to stay on the ground when the system knocked him down." When Jamal entered City Hall, the guard at the front desk stood up and saluted him. "You showed us all what standing looks like, Mr. Carter." Inside his office, there were no golden frames, no plaques, just a whiteboard with 3 words: listen, fight, build, and a framed photo of his students, holding signs that read, "Mr. Carter made the world safer." Part 7. The Seat at the Table. Jamal Carter's first day as city councilman wasn't glamorous. No red carpets, no welcome banners. Just a worn chair, a thin stack of city documents, and a heavy silence in the room when he walked in. Some saw him as a hero. Others saw him as a threat. But Jamal had no interest in being liked. He was here to do what no one else would: tell the truth and make it count. By week 2, Jamal had submitted his first proposal, the Oakdale Transparency and Policing Accountability Act, which included civilian review board with oversight power, public access to use of force data, required de-escalation training for all patrol officers, annual mental health evaluations for officers. The reaction? Cold, quiet, dismissive. One senior council member told him privately, "You're pushing too hard, too fast." Jamal replied, "People bleed fast too." Behind closed doors, things got worse. A donor who once supported Jamal called and said, "Back off the policing bill or we pull funding from community initiatives." A prominent newspaper columnist wrote, "Carter is proving he can win an election, but not work within a system that values stability." Jamal read it 3 times, then closed the article and opened his notebook. On the first page, he wrote, "I wasn't elected to be comfortable. I was elected to be useful." While City Hall played defense, the community doubled down. Local teachers' union released a letter backing Jamal's proposal. Faith leaders from Black, Latino, and Asian churches organized a Unity Sunday. One city, one standard. Children at a local elementary school held a "What Makes a Leader" art contest. The winner drew Jamal standing between 2 buildings. One labeled City Hall, the other People. Underneath, the child had written, "He listens like a grown-up, but cares like a kid." 3 weeks later, Jamal received word that one of his fellow progressive council members had met with the police union privately and agreed to water down the bill. No oversight power, no public data, no teeth. Jamal was furious. He confronted her in the hallway. "You said we were in this together." She avoided his eyes. "You don't understand how this works yet. You push too hard, you lose everything." Jamal stepped back, jaw tight. "No, you settled too fast, and we lose everything." That night, Jamal met up with Officer Deshaun Ellis, the same officer who had supported him from the beginning. They sat on a park bench under the streetlights. "I want to believe reform is possible," Jamal said, "but I'm losing allies faster than I can make them." Ellis nodded. "You think it was easy wearing this badge after what happened to you?" "Cops looked at me like I betrayed them." "But you stayed," Jamal said, "because change doesn't happen when you walk away. It happens when you stand still, in the heat, and refuse to disappear." Jamal gathered his team. "No more waiting. If they won't push this bill, we'll bring the people into the room." They launched a citywide listening tour. At community centers, school gyms, fire stations, Jamal held open meetings. People spoke, cried, yelled, hugged. Stories poured out. A Black teen tackled for jaywalking. A Latina mother whose 911 call ended with her son in handcuffs. A disabled veteran stopped and searched 5 times in 6 months. Jamal didn't give speeches. He took notes. He told them, "This bill is not mine, it's yours. And if they kill it, we won't mourn, we'll multiply." One of the city's biggest newspapers, which had been lukewarm on Jamal, sent a reporter to one of the forums. She expected a show. What she found was a movement. Her editorial hit the front page the next day. "Councilman Carter isn't radical. He's relevant. The system should fear silence, not truth." When the bill finally reached the floor, the room was packed. Cameras, clergy, teachers, veterans, teenagers in hoodies. Jamal stood up to deliver his statement before the vote. I didn't come here to burn bridges. I came here to build new ones, strong enough to carry people who've been left behind. This bill is about visibility, because when people are invisible, they get treated like threats instead of neighbors. And we're done being invisible. Then he sat down. The roll call began. One by one, the votes came in. 7 yes, 6 no. The bill passed. Applause erupted. Jamal exhaled. For once, truth didn't just speak. It voted. Part 8. The work after the win. The night after the vote, Jamal sat alone in his office. Long after the cameras had gone, he stared at the framed bill, passed by a single vote, now signed, sealed, and awaiting implementation. But this didn't feel like a finish line. It felt like a reset button. Because now, the real battle began. By week 3, Jamal's office had received a dozen complaints. The new civilian review board was being stalled by red tape. Police departments weren't complying with transparency requirements. One precinct had scheduled their first de-escalation training at 6 a.m. on a Sunday, knowing few would show. It was sabotage in slow motion, and the people noticed. Marcus, now 17, once Jamal's student, now his unpaid youth advisor, came into the office, frustrated. They're not following the law. You won. Why aren't they listening? Jamal leaned forward. Because systems don't just change on paper, they resist with every bolt in their frame. So what now? We outlast them. Then it happened again. A 22-year-old black man named Terrence Lowe was stopped, beaten, and arrested for non-compliance after asking an officer why he was being questioned in a public park. The video hit the internet within hours. The community, already tired, now boiled. Protesters filled the streets. This time they weren't just demanding justice. They were asking, did the bill change anything? At a town hall, Jamal stood before a restless crowd. Some shouted, some cried. One man yelled, "You gave us hope, Carter, but they're still hurting us." Jamal didn't flinch. Hope isn't a shield, it's a spark. I can't promise pain will vanish overnight, but I can promise I will never stop dragging truth into the light. If they're still hurting us, it means our work isn't done. So I'm not leaving, I'm digging in. Jamal demanded a formal review of Officer Simmons, the one who assaulted Terrence. His request was denied, citing lack of sufficient evidence. So Jamal took to the mic again, but this time not in City Hall. He stood in front of the police headquarters and addressed a live-streamed audience. If accountability depends on what's sufficient, we've already failed. The people's voice is evidence. Their pain is proof. The next day, the review was reopened. Word of Jamal's persistence began to spread beyond Oakdale. CNN invited him to join a roundtable on this systemic reform. He debated a former police chief, a conservative lawmaker, and a civil liberties professor. When asked if he was anti-cop, Jamal responded, "I'm not anti-anyone. I'm anti-broken systems, anti-hiding behind uniforms. I'm pro-accountability, pro-community, pro-humanity." The moderator turned to the audience and said, "That's leadership, right there." That same week, Jamal's office received a package. No return address. Inside, a fake bloodied badge and a note. "If you keep poking the system, don't be surprised when it bites back." Jamal showed it to security. They offered to relocate him for safety. He said no. "If I move, they win. If I shut up, they win. If I disappear, we lose." Officer Deshaun Ellis came by the office again. He looked tired, worn down. "We've got guys in the department who are trying," he said, "but they're drowning in the culture. We need your help, from the inside." "Matt, what are you saying?" Jamal asked. "I'm saying I want to help create a new training model. Officer-to-community partnerships, like a boot camp for trust." Jamal smiled. "Let's build it." Marcus brought together a group of teens from 5 different high schools. They formed YARD, Youth for Accountability, Reform and Dignity. They launched campaigns, wrote op-eds, held community circles. One poster read, "We inherited the silence. We choose the microphone." Jamal watched them and knew, this is what success looks like. Not press, not polls, but momentum you didn't force. Then came the big one. A call from Senator Miriam Lane in Washington. Her voice was firm but warm. "Councilman Carter, I've been following your work. We're assembling a task force on national policing standards, and I'd like you at the table." Jamal was silent for a moment, then said, "When's the flight?" Part 9. The Weight of the Microphone. The U.S. Capitol was nothing like Oakdale City Hall. Polished floors, security scans, people speaking in carefully measured tones, not from the heart, but from political survival. As Jamal stood in the marble rotunda waiting for his meeting with Senator Miriam Lane, he took a slow breath. He didn't feel like he belonged, but that was exactly why he came. The National Task Force on Police Reform was a mix of senators, academics, community leaders, and law enforcement professionals. Jamal was the only one who had lived both sides, a victim of police brutality, a sitting city councilman, a voice the people trusted. Senator Lane introduced him as a man who didn't wait for permission to speak, and who speaks not for applause, but for those who never got a mic. The room applauded. Jamal sat down. As discussions began, Jamal noticed something troubling. Too many words, not enough urgency. One senator said, "We have to be careful not to move too fast." Another said, "Let's not forget officers' morale matters too." Jamal listened, then finally stood. "With respect, we've been moving carefully for decades. People are dead. Communities are scared. If morale is more sacred than justice, then we don't need a task force. We need a mirror." The room went silent. Senator Lane smiled quietly. After the session, reporters swarmed Jamal. "Do you feel heard?" one asked. "No, but I feel amplified, and that's a start." His clip was aired on every major network. Social media exploded. "Councilman Carter speaks truth in Congress. Finally, a leader who gets it." But with praise came pushback. A prominent right-wing commentator called him the most dangerous man in politics. His inbox filled with both love and hate. But Jamal stayed focused. While Jamal was in D.C., YARD, the youth group he helped inspire, held a peace rally in Oakdale. A counter-protester showed up. Things escalated. Police stepped in and arrested 3 black teens while letting the counter-protester walk away. The footage hit the internet. Jamal's heart sank. Back in Oakdale, Jamal met with the teens who'd been arrested. One of them, a quiet kid named Evan, stared down at the table. "You said it would be different now," Evan muttered. "You said things were changing." Jamal sat beside him. "I did, and they are. But change doesn't mean perfection. It means pressure, and we have to keep applying it." Evan looked up. "Then don't leave us again." Jamal swallowed hard. "I won't." Jamal returned to City Council with a new proposal, the Community Protection Equity Act, mandatory review for any arrest made at a protest. No youth under 18 can be arrested without immediate parental notification. Civilian ombudsman required during public demonstrations. It passed with a narrow vote. The mayor, who once kept her distance, now called Jamal a necessary disruptor. Then came the news that his mother had a mild stroke. He rushed to Macon, sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand. "You always carry the whole world," she whispered, "but don't forget to carry yourself." He nodded. That night he canceled all press. No interviews, no travel, just time to remember why he started. Layla stopped by the next week, the woman who filmed his original assault. They sat on his porch again. "I never told you," she said, "but I get anxiety every time I see police lights now. Just flashing lights, and my heart races." "I'm sorry you carry that," Jamal said. She smiled. "It made me braver, not smaller." Then handed him an envelope. Inside was a photo. Jamal speaking to the Senate task force. Behind him, a mosaic of faces, citizens, kids, protesters. Below it, the words, "You carry us too." A few days later, Jamal walked through the Oakdale Park at sunset. The bench where he was once handcuffed now had a small plaque. "For those who called for help and never stopped calling." He sat down, looked out at the sky, and for the first time in a long time, he felt still. Not because the fight was over, but because he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Part 10. The Light That Stays On. A year had passed since the day Jamal Carter was thrown to the ground on his own lawn. 12 months. But for Jamal, it felt like a lifetime. In that year, he had survived police brutality, sued the city, and won. Been elected to public office, written 2 major reform bills, spoken before Congress, and most importantly, refused to disappear. Now the world hadn't become perfect, but it had changed, and so had he. The sentencing of officers Westfield and Riggins had been delayed due to legal maneuvering, but it was finally here. Jamal sat in the courtroom once more, only this time, not as a victim, not as a councilman, not even as a symbol, just as himself. The judge delivered the sentence. Riggins, 3 years, no parole, for assault and falsifying a report. Westfield, 18 months probation and mandatory public service. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And for Jamal, something was better than silence. When given a chance to speak, Jamal stood and faced the court. I don't hate these men. I hate the culture that raised them to see me as a threat. This isn't about revenge. It's about remembering. Because if we forget what happened, it will happen again. He turned to the officers. I hope you both go home one day better than the day you found me. Judge Troy, the Community Protection Equity Act became a model for cities across the country. Senator Miriam Lane submitted a national version of the bill. And Jamal? He became the advisor, not the headline. He helped other communities navigate reform. He supported activists, wrote op-eds, mentored young candidates, including Marcus, who had now officially announced a run for City Youth Council. Jamal returned to the classroom one last time, not to teach, just to listen. The students asked him, was it worth it? He smiled. Every bruise, every headline, every long night? Yes, because now you walk into a world where people have to think twice before ignoring your voice. That's not everything, but it's a start. One morning, Jamal received a letter from Terrence Lowe, the young man who had been assaulted in the park months earlier. Dear Mr. Carter, thank you for standing up when I couldn't. You gave me the strength to speak. I'm in school now while I'm studying criminal justice. I'm not afraid anymore. Jamal folded the letter slowly and cried, not from sadness, but from release. At the corner of the same block where Jamal once lay, cuffed and bleeding, a new bench was installed by the city. This time, no plaque. Just a quote, carved into stone. Called for help, spoke when unheard, stayed when pushed, changed what wouldn't, and etched at the bottom. Jacques J.C. One evening as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Jamal jogged again. Same street, same shoes. Only this time, no fear in his chest. Neighbors waved, a police cruiser passed. The officer nodded, respectfully. A kid on a bike caught up with him and said, "You're the guy who changed things, right?" Jamal smiled, breath steady. "No, kid, I'm the guy who refused to stay quiet." Years later, Jamal Carter's name would be found in books, museums, and policy documents. But to the people of Oakdale, he was always just Jamal, the man who turned a call for help into a call for change. And the change stayed. The end.